This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
I've always loved French onion soup, and a couple of years ago I was having lunch at the Dobbin House Tavern in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and they made what they called their King's onion soup, and it was made with all kinds of great onions, very traditional French onion, but an added bonus, it had been cooked with cubes of beef in it. Let me show you how I make it at home. Now, to get started, you need some onions. You need about 2.5 pounds, and that's usually 3 or 4 large onions. And you can use any kind of onion that you like. In fact, today I'm using a red, a white, and a yellow onion. It doesn't really matter. The color won't be there when we're done with this soup. And what you're going to want to do is peel them, cut them in half, and then take each half and cut them into very thin slices like this. You can imagine I had to wear my onion goggles for this one. Then you get your medium-sized soup pot. You put a tablespoon or so of olive oil in it on medium-high heat. And then you're going to get just a pound of stewing beef. And then you're going to let that brown in the oil for about 5 minutes. Now, after the 5 minutes, you're going to want to go ahead and take that meat out of the pot. And what I do is I just have a little bowl on the side, and I use my large spoon. I just sort of spoon it out, but I leave the pot on the heat so that it stays nice and hot. And then I'm going to put in 4 tablespoons of butter, and I'm going to let that melt. And then I'm going to bring the onions over, and I'm going to pop those into the pan. Now, to get the most flavor out of these onions, we're going to cook them in 2 stages. This first stage is when we just initially put them into the pan, and we're going to kind of stir them around and make sure that they're coated with butter. But then we're going to turn the heat down to medium, and we're going to put a lid on top of this, and we're going to let this cook slowly for about 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, you're going to find that the onions, they're not browning, they're just getting soft and translucent, which is what we want. Now we're going to start with the second stage of cooking on the onions. And to accomplish that, we're going to put in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. And then we're going to turn our heat up to medium high. And what's going to happen is we're going to start caramelizing these onions. And it's going to take a total of about 20 minutes. And you are going to need to come back every now and then and stir them up. Initially, they're just going to look like they're sweating like this. But not too long, after about 5 minutes or so, you're going to start to see some color on the bottom of the pan, which is that great fond, which gives wonderful flavor to our soup. Now, the reason we want to keep stirring these every few minutes is there's enough liquid in the onions that it will scrape up those brown bits on the pan for us. We don't want them to collect so much that they start to burn. So just keep stirring them every few minutes. Really try to keep that fond off the bottom of the pan. And in no time at all, they're going to be this dark caramel color. And to that, then, we're going to add a tablespoon of flour. And we're going to let that cook for about a minute or so. That's going to help thicken our soup. Now, once the flour has cooked for a little bit, then we're going to start adding some of our beef stock. And there's a way to do this so that your soup doesn't get lumpy. We're going to be using a total of 8 cups of stock, but what I like to do is just pour in a little bit at a time, because as the liquid hits that hot flour, see how quickly and how thick that soup gets, which is great. Then I'm going to add a little bit more stock to it. And I'm going to start, to be honest with you, with about 2 cups of stock. And then once I see that everything is nice and nothing's lumping on me, the flour's cooked in nicely, I'm going to add the rest of the stock. I'm going to add a cup of dry white wine, like a Sauvignon Blanc, and then 1/4 cup of brandy. Then pop in 2 sprigs of fresh thyme, and then all of the meat that we've pre-cooked with any juices that have collected at the bottom of the bowl. And then I'm just going to give this a little stir, and I want to bring this soup up to a boil now. So I'm going to leave the lid off, and I'm just going to kind of let it start to bubble. Then once it does bubble, I'm going to put a lid on it, but only part way. I want that steam to evaporate so that the flavors start to condense, and I'm going to turn the heat down to a low heat, and I'm going to let this simmer from anywhere for 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Now, when it's time to serve the soup, you're going to want to grate up some Gruyere cheese, which is like a Swiss cheese. And then you're going to want to get some French bread that you're going to cut some thick slices of, because we're going to put those under the broiler and toast them on one side. Then you're going to want to use some bowls or crocks that can go in the oven. And so what you do is you take them and put them on a piece of foil on a rimmed baking sheet. That way they won't slide around on you when you put them in the oven. And then you just take your soup off the stove, pull out your little twigs of thyme, all the leaves have come off, and then it's time to start filling our bowls. Now, this soup makes enough for 6 servings. I'm only making it for 3 tonight, but you can put the rest in the refrigerator and have it the next night. And you'll notice I'm filling the crocks or the bowls up almost all the way to the top. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my French bread out. Now, you're going to want to put your toasted bread on top of the soup, and depending on the size of the bowl, sometimes you have to bend the end of the bread off, but don't worry about that. It'll all taste fantastic. And then once you get the bread nicely placed on your bowls, then go ahead and get your Gruyere cheese, and you're just going to pile that on top. Now, be really generous with your cheese. Let it spill over the edges. That's part of the charm of this soup. Then, once you've got all your cheese on, we're going to pop these under the broiler. Make sure you've lowered your rack to about the 2nd or 3rd notch. And we're going to pop those in, and you just want to watch this for a few minutes. It won't take more than about 3 or 4 minutes. And when they come out, the cheese should be nice and bubbly and brown like this. Now, as you move your bowls of soup onto plates to serve, make sure you use your oven mitts because those crocks are really hot. Well, this French onion soup is unbelievable, and what makes it unbelievable is not only cooking the onions and getting them nicely caramelized, but those little bits of beef are just fantastic. Now, if you want to give it a go at home, just go to our website, visit the soups on show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. Also, if you have any questions, send me an email. I'll see you next time.